intro-wise. Titties. I just want to tweet this out before I forget.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Engadget Podcast, brought to you by Verizon's Powerful Answers, because the world's biggest challenges deserve even bigger solutions. I'm Terrence O'Brien.
I'm Ben Gilbert.
And Joseph is missing this week.
He's on vacation.
Lucky bastard.
I'm actually not sure where.
I'm assuming he's sitting at home just day drinking.
As far as I know, he has left the confines of New York City. I'm presuming for the wilds of upstate New York, perhaps.
Oh, getting all fancy. He's
Something
off
like that?
skiing or drinking.
I would imagine there's a lot of laying about wherever he is, but
Yeah.
I don't know that he's still here in the city, in our cold,
Miserable.
bleak.
Well, I mean, to be fair,
February
it's
city.
cold, bleak, and miserable in upstate New York, too.
It is.
As much as I love the Hudson Valley and everything, it is a freezing, cold, snowy hell of a place.
It's just pretty.
It's
very
beautiful.
pretty. It's nice.
I'll probably be moving there soon anyway.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're all gonna, because we're all gonna get forced out of New York City at some
Yeah.
point soon.
I mean, I can't even afford to live on Staten Island anymore.
It's really a shame. So we're doing a different show this week, though, right? We don't have the video component.
Yeah, nobody can see our pretty faces.
It's just me and you and our delightful producer John Turry sitting.
Hey, John.
Sitting in a small side room.
Yeah. It's probably going to get a little toasty in here at some point.
That's okay. We both got sweaters on.
Yeah.
We're gonna get a little too warm.
Yeah. I'll probably take it off in the middle of it. You'll hear some rustling.
And it's been a pretty exciting week.
It has.
Pretty thrilling week.
I mean, there was tons of stuff that happened. We'll get back to it later, but there was that whole Google, Motorola, Lenovo thing, which is really the huge news of the week.
That was fun because that happened at like 5.
Yeah, it happened an hour after my shift theoretically ended, and yet I still got saddled with covering it and staying on the conference call with the announcement.
Oh, you gotta. You're the
Yeah, I mean,
newsman.
it was cool. It's fun.
How it
No,
goes.
I won't lie. It was the most fun I've actually had on this job in a while. It was super fun to do that. It's not every day that we get to cover, like seriously interesting, exciting, breaking stories as they're happening like that.
So it sounds like we're jumping into it.
Yeah,
Let's
well,
jump into it. It's okay.
you want to just jump into
Well,
it?
where do you want to start? I'm not gonna step on your toes, buddy.
Okay. So the basic story is Lenovo purchased Motorola's handset division from Google for $2.91 billion, roughly. Of course, subject to approval by various governmental agencies.
Sure. Lenovo is a Chinese company.
Yes, they are a Chinese company.
And Motorola owned by Google.
Yep, owned
American
by Google,
company.
an American company. And Lenovo's been looking to increase its presence in the handset marketplace for a while now. They are the second largest handset manufacturer in China,
Right.
but have basically zero presence in the U.S. market.
Well, that's part of why I brought up the China thing, because Lenovo, as far as I'm concerned, is a company that makes laptops.
Yep.
I mean, I know that they do that as well as other stuff, but that's in terms of American consumer perspective. That is my perspective on Lenovo.
And I think that's most American consumers' perspectives. I mean, they know them most. They know them most as the company that bought the ThinkPad line from IBM. That's it. I mean, when's the last time you walked into an AT&T store and saw a Lenovo phone on the shelf?
No, I think the whole time, I mean, in fairness, I've only been covering tech as a beat for a couple of years. It was all video games before that, but in the time that I've been with Engadget, I've covered one Lenovo phone, and it was a complete boondoggle.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for the American market. It was like a gold and silver Chinese phone.
That was at CES last year, right? Where
Correct.
the rep didn't even know what OS was running on it, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, there was definitely some issues with regards to whether it was a Windows phone versus an Android phone, I believe.
Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
was something like that.
Something like that.
But this immediately gives them a massive presence in the Americas and a pretty good presence in Western Europe. It makes them the third largest smartphone manufacturer in the Americas. That's not just the U.S. That's both continents. And they're bringing with them, with the purchase of Motorola, they're getting existing relationships with all of these carriers and brand name recognition, and you're not going to see the Motorola brand disappear, which is kind of the important thing. They said very specifically on the call announcing the deal that the Lenovo brand is going to be what they use in places where that's already established and successful.
Right.
So,
Asia.
yeah, you're going to still see a ton of Lenovo phones in China. You might see a few more Motorola phones, but Probably not. They're probably going to focus on the Lenovo brand.
Sure.
And in the U.S., you're not going to see a sudden flood of Lenovo phones. They're going to keep selling them as Motorola phones because that's what people know. That's what people are comfortable with. The question, that's still sort of unanswered is what's going to be the distinction between those two brands at this point. Whether or not they're going to go with a very distinct identity for both brands, or whether they're just going to slap the Motorola name on existing Lenovo phones or the Lenovo name on existing Motorola phones, whether one's going to be a high-end line or the other one's going to be... So there's a ton of questions that are still very much up in the air.
So that's the good stuff we know about
Yeah.
what Lenovo's getting from the deal. What is Google getting out of the deal?
Well, Google is getting money, obviously,
Right.
in the form of cash and some stock in Lenovo. Not a controlling share or anything
What
like
was
that.
the
But
original purchase price of Motorola?
Google purchased Motorola in 2011 for $12.5 billion.
Okay.
Broke up the company, sold off the set-top box and all that stuff to Aris.
Right.
I don't remember for how much off the
I think
top
it
of
was
my head.
$3 billion or $4
Something like
billion.
that.
Right.
And now they've sold off the handset business to Lenovo. And while that might sound like they've taken a huge loss on the company, that's not necessarily the case.
Motorola was already kind of bleeding money as far as I know. Well, maybe not bleeding.
They were
leaking
bleeding money. They were bleeding money. Motorola hasn't turned a profit in years.
Right.
The last quarter, I think they lost something in the range of $350 million. The quarter before that, it was something like $250 million. I mean, they're not hemorrhaging necessarily, but they're at this point a relatively small business, and that amount of money does represent a pretty significant chunk of change.
So this is super interesting to me because Motorola. My question from the second that I started talking to you guys about this stuff, like last year, was essentially, why doesn't Google make its own standard? This is Motorola's, Google phone, and it drove me nuts forever. And the argument was always it'll cannibalize the business of other Android devices and eats into their shares with third parties.
Yeah,
which is fine. But I guess the question I have is, why doesn't... It seems like Motorola was never given a chance to really earn money, right? Like, the Moto X and the Moto G are the first phones that they've made that I recognize as, worthwhile consumer products.
Yeah, and they're the first two phones that they've released that also bear the undeniable stamp of Google.
Right. And so it's really... I don't know. It seems like they were bought, and they were underutilized, and then they were sold off before they had a chance to really... give it a shot. Maybe I'm misreading that. At least that's my perspective.
I mean, I think there is certainly a valid argument to that. I think certain cynics out there, while I don't embrace this argument wholeheartedly, I can see how people would see it, that Google got exactly what they wanted out of Motorola, which is patents. Because
they did keep that stuff, right?
They're
so
keeping
this is the other part of the deal.
They're keeping the vast majority of the Motorola patents. And when Google first purchased Motorola, a lot of people out there were saying that it was all about the patents for them. It was all about, building up their legal arsenal because their Android and manufacturers that were building Android phones were coming under a lot of attacks from Apple and Microsoft and all these other companies that were trying to, ring them for licensing fees.
Right, the ongoing nonsense patent wars in the electronics industry. Right.
They're the worst thing in the world.
Right. In the 1,000-foot view of the biggest, most nonsensical fight in such an expensive... I'm sorry, I don't want to get off into a complete tangent.
No, it's cool.
The stupidest thing in the world.
Oh, no, it is. I mean, it's the sort of thing where even us as, supposedly... objective journalists can't help but vent our frustration about directly on the site in posts.
Right.
It's this is nonsense.
Right.
And so a lot of people thought that was the primary reason why Google bought Motorola, and this move would seem to back up their argument.
Sure. That's part of it, though, right?
That's
half of part of the reason that people are arguing that why Google bought them originally. And the other half is the I really don't like the term skunkworks at all, so I don't want to use it.
Yeah.
But the team of folks who do weird kind of cool R&D stuff.
Yeah, which Google is also keeping.
Right. And so they're keeping that stuff. And that's the interesting side of this to me. The patent stuff is okay, I get it. They need to own a bunch of patents because they need to fight that battle.
Before we move on from the patent stuff, sorry.
You're not excused.
There's no excuse for me. The interesting thing here is that, while Google is keeping the vast majority of them, they are transferring around 2,000 of Motorola's patents to Lenovo.
Right.
And they've signed a licensing deal with Lenovo so that Lenovo has access to those patents, thus protecting Lenovo, hopefully, from future litigation. And Google recently just signed a similar deal with Samsung, licensing out their patents. So, it's not just about protecting Google. Google is clearly trying to protect everybody as possible, and they're using that as a revenue stream as well. So even if it sounds like they've, losing a lot of money because they bought Motorola for $12.5 billion and ultimately have sold off its pieces for around $6 billion, they're making money still on those licensing deals. A ton of money. They haven't announced how much, but I can guarantee you those are not cheap deals.
Right.
So, but then the other part
They're not doing it to be nice people and just buying up patents so they can share them with the world of electronics.
No, they want to share them to protect their partners, like Samsung, and we'll come back to that in a little bit, actually, because there's some interesting stuff on that one. But yeah, they're also keeping the advanced research division of Motorola, which is joining the Android division, I believe, at this point, which is sort of interesting to me because you'd think it would be folded into their like moonshot projects, into their
Project
Google
X and
the
stuff,
X
right.
Labs.
Yeah.
That would seem where it would make sense, seeing as how the stuff they've worked on previously is like tattoos and pills that replace passwords, and the Ara, the modular phone, that's not going to Lenovo, that's staying with Google.
Right.
So there's still a lot of interesting stuff there. They will probably put that stuff to work in their various other hardware projects, and Google was very specific to say that the sale of the handset business does not affect their other hardware initiatives. So, Nest is still going to build stuff.
Sure.
And Google will probably make a sequel to the Chromebook Pixel at some point.
Sure.
They're going to...
Why not? I mean, I can think of some reasons why not. But
Well,
they probably will.
They will.
Sure.
I mean, it's a lovely device, but...
Sure. Let's say that.
It is.
I still can't think of a reason why I would own a Chromebook, but sure. They're pretty. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, let's not get on too much of attention on that one. But the Chromebook is a lovely device that's way overpriced. Is ultimately what it boils
absolutely
down to.
right.
If the Chromebook Pixel was like $500 or $600, maybe.
It doesn't even have nope. Nope. No dice.
No.
If it was like $200, sure.
So, but right before this story broke with Motorola going to Lenovo, another story broke about Samsung and Google signing a pact,
right,
whereby Samsung was going to scale back its customization on Android.
Oh man, you're being way too nice about this. Samsung's gonna hopefully kill its stupid Android skins that everybody hates, that literally nobody buys a phone for.
Yeah,
that they've
does.
repeatedly convinced themselves through marketing that that's why people buy phones.
Yeah,
and it is never the reason why people buy phones.
Yep, no. It's
God damn it,
terrible.
Drives me crazy.
Well. So yeah, supposedly they signed a pact where they're going to start scaling back these customizations, and yes, I'm trying to be a little bit nice about it.
Fine.
For the moment.
Sure.
I'll yell about it in a minute, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And start shifting the focus away from their own in-house services like Media Hub and whatever other silly things that they make that nobody uses,
sure,
and start focusing more on the core Google services and, Hangouts instead of Chat On, I think
you could be making up names right now for their stuff.
Very well might be.
All the stuff that I actively ignore on any Samsung device I've ever used with Android. That stuff.
Yeah,
that's the stuff you mean. The stuff that I try to hide as soon as possible the second I use a phone that has skin on it.
That you could, if you could, you would immediately delete.
Right,
but most of it you can't.
Right.
So, but that story broke like immediately beforehand, and one of the things that wasn't clear was, Google got all of these concessions out of Samsung, supposedly. But what did Samsung get in return? And it turns out that it might be that Google isn't going to make phones anymore. It might be that they don't have to worry that Google is just going to cut out these third parties and build its own Nexus devices. Because
is Samsung and other third parties, are they really that insecure that that's going to happen? Google's never intimated that. They bought Motorola and didn't. And you'd think that would be enough of an assurance for them.
I think the fear was that, because they could that it was inevitable, that it was a matter of Google trimming the fat at Motorola, whipping it into shape, and making it more nimble before unleashing like a truly amazing device that they were going to make certain elements of Android and the larger Google ecosystem exclusive to that device. And that whether or not Google did that, the threat was always there that it could happen. And I think that made a lot of these companies uncomfortable. And I think that's understandable. If you're Samsung and you're the largest manufacturer of Android phones on Earth, and your entire success basically rides on continuing to build these highly successful Android-powered devices, the last thing you want is the company that makes Android shutting you out of key parts of it.
So my argument would be that if you're Samsung, you should diversify your business strategy so that you're not wholly dependent on a single thing. Like, that's their problem, not Google's fault.
Well,
right?
I mean, and they have. Samsung makes Windows phones,
right?
And Samsung has their own OS in Tizen.
They also make other stuff.
Yeah,
they make TVs and stuff.
Oh,
I think Samsung's probably fine.
They're fine, but they know that they need to be a big player in that mobile scene.
Sure.
And the problem is that even if they've diversified their portfolio in terms of building Windows devices and all that stuff, none of that stuff is going to be nearly as successful as Android. You need that business. You need access to that stuff, and you need it to be running 100% on your devices. You can't have some neutered version of it because Google has decided that we're going to have a Motorola-built Nexus device that has access to all these exclusive things.
I think that you'd see a lot of licensing dry up, though, for Google, right? Like, if
I think
all
you
of a
would,
sudden they decided that they were going to make something that was like, this is our version of Android, and we're the only ones getting it, and all of our partners can go F themselves, they would all stop supporting Google, and that would be a huge problem for Google, right?
Yeah.
So it's like this careful balance. And I don't know. It just seems nuts that this is the same kind of stuff this is the same conversations we've had about Valve with Steam machines, and it's the same approach where it's like we have third parties that we have to work with, and we have to be careful to make sure that we're respecting what they want and what they're trying to do. At the same time, like the company at the top, Google in this case, is the one making Android. So like, I don't know. It always made sense to me that Google would make their own phone, and it would be fine that they made their own phone, and there'd be third parties that made maybe better phones that competed, right?
Yeah.
Like the HTC One, I'd rather use an HTC One than a Nexus 5.
Yeah.
Like, I would personally. That's
Okay.
just me.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, the Nexus 5 is the HTC One is an amazing phone.
It's a nice phone,
Personally,
right. Sure, it's a personal thing,
Yeah.
right? Like, but my point in saying that though is that there are pluses and minuses to both of those phones, and one is made by, so to speak, Google, and the other is not, and they're both great, right? Like, I think Google could still make their own thing, and it would be fine for third parties.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only reason why that comparison doesn't necessarily work though is because the Nexus 5 is not built by Google;
Right,
it's
yeah.
built by LG.
Yeah, I mean, this is as close as I can come to a Google phone. I guess I could say the Moto X. Then,
The Moto
right?
X would be but I think ultimately what Google decided is that it made those third parties uncomfortable, and that it wasn't worth continuing to have it around, especially if it was going to continue to lose money.
Sure.
And I think that they just decided this is the most effective way to deal with this problem, and they clearly viewed it as a problem. They got what they wanted out of it, more or less.
It seems crazy to me from an outsider's perspective, like billions of dollars, hundreds or thousands of people's jobs. Like,
yeah,
it's not a little deal, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a huge thing.
And let's talk about that for a minute, the jobs thing.
Sure.
Because
that affects a lot.
It does affect a lot.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people on the conference call were asking about how it was going to affect the people in the corporate offices for Motorola outside of Chicago, or they're apparently moving to Chicago, or we're planning to move to Chicago.
Sure.
We'll see if that happens. And the executive team, and
I hear Chicago is lovely.
It is. It's a lovely, lovely
I've
city.
never been.
And Lenovo execs assured people that there are no immediate plans for layoffs. And
immediate. I like that the word
plans.
immediate is part of
Yeah,
that
I mean, you figure it's inevitable
sure.
for a company that's continuing to lose money.
Right.
And
I mean, it's not even that. It's just in acquisitions that stuff happens.
Yeah,
right?
it always happens.
There's going to be redundancies, and
Yeah.
that's how that goes. As crappy as it is.
So there's no immediate plans for a leadership shake-up, no immediate plans for layoffs. There will be layoffs, I'm sure, at some point.
Sure.
If you think there aren't going to be, you're a very naive person. The thing that was more interesting to me personally was, how is this going to affect, it's a small group of people, but the people manufacturing the Moto X in Texas.
Sure. Well, that was a big play, right? Like, that was a big part of the Moto X thing, was like manufactured in the U.S.
Yeah.
And that's been part of the bigger electronics picture in the past year. I mean, between Apple and Google jumping in, that's like, those are two pretty huge players.
And, on the call, the Lenovo execs sort of hemmed and hawed and said, kind of, well, most of Motorola's phones are built outsourced anyway, and
it sounds like some nonsense.
We're gonna do whatever's necessary to, quote, grow the brand, which basically made it sound like the plant would be closing tomorrow.
Sure.
It turns out things are not necessarily that cut and dry, though. So immediately after that call, Flextronics had their earnings call. And Flextronics is the subcontractor that runs the plant in Fort Worth, Texas, where the Moto X is manufactured.
Okay.
So those people building the Moto X are not directly employed by Motorola. They're employed by a third party.
That's very interesting. So they're not, they're probably not able to be fired by Motorola then. Or by Lenovo, I guess I should say.
But they could terminate the contract with the plant and that would effectively cost these people their job.
Not necessarily. You don't know how that plant works.
No.
I don't either.
So
they could all be fine. They could start making Hello Kitty phones instead. Who knows?
So as I started digging into this a little bit, and there's a piece up on the site about it that I wrote yesterday, which I suggest everybody read. I will dump it in the chat at some point when I get a minute to look at my laptop. It's actually kind of a complicated story, and there's reason to kind of be hopeful that not only will the Fort Worth plant survive and those jobs aren't in immediate danger, but that Motorola phones will continue to be built in the U.S. going forward. Because, Flextronics is a subcontractor of Motorola building these phones. They have an existing relationship. Flextronics is also a subcontractor for Lenovo, and they build devices for that company here in the U.S. Additionally, Lenovo has manufacturing sites in the U.S. They're one of the few computer companies building computers in the United States. They will say they're the only company directly manufacturing computers in the United States, and they have to add that qualifier because technically Apple builds machines here as well.
Right.
So I'm not exactly sure what the distinction between directly manufactured and whatever Apple is doing.
Okay. Aren't also like pieces of that stuff? Isn't it more like assembled in the U.S. a lot of times?
Well, yeah. like the hard drive is not being put together bit by bit on an assembly line in North Carolina by Lenovo workers.
I think that's interesting because there's like that distinction though between, like, the government makes a distinction between the term assembled in and made in.
Yeah.
I think it has to be like a certain number of the parts or a certain percentage of the parts have to be sourced in origin from the country where it is being built to be called made in.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like this unbelievably ridiculous technical thing, but that's essentially like a lot of the conversation in the past year when it says like made in the U.S. or assembled in the U.S. or whatever. It's like maybe some of it is and some of it isn't, and yeah. So.
And it's a weird sort of loophole that allowed a lot of actual Japanese car companies to get away with saying their cars were assembled in America for quite a long time.
Honda and Toyota, at least,
yes.
not more, but yeah.
No longer exists, but Saturn, I believe, as well. Were they not Japanese? They were ultimately owned.
They were
by
owned
Japanese?
by GM.
Were they? Okay.
I think.
So I have no idea.
Anyway,
let's
stop
cars.
talking about cars. Yeah, leave that to Autoblog.
So, but yeah, and Flextronics is pretty optimistic that they're going to be able to expand this relationship with Lenovo. And shortly after their earnings call, Lenovo released a follow-up statement that there were no immediate plans to change how Motorola manufactures its devices.
Okay.
So there's hope there that at least for the foreseeable future that relationship is going to exist. And here's the things that give me a little bit of optimism about this going forward is, one, Lenovo is super proud of the amount of money they've pumped into the U.S. at this point. I think they said counting the acquisition of Motorola and the IBM server business, which they just did recently, since 2005, they've invested roughly $6 billion in their U.S. business alone. Plus, they had all sorts of numbers bragging about how they spend $10 billion on purchasing goods and services from U.S.-based companies and
toilet paper and
soda.
soda.
But they have 2,200 employees at their Raleigh, North Carolina American headquarters. They have 115 people at this plant outside of Raleigh where they're building ThinkPads. So they're very big on this. They're very proud of this. And one of the reasons why they opened that plant is because it allows them to do late-stage customization of PCs, which is extremely important, and still deliver them quickly.
What do you mean late-stage customization? Like software and stuff?
Not just software, but if you can swap in and out pieces, and they're not putting the larger hard drive that you want in the computer in an assembly line in China and then having to wait for that to ship across the ocean in a container. It's coming out of a place in North Carolina, and it can get to the customer a lot quicker.
Sure.
You're spending less on transporting it. So it's might be a little bit more expensive to manufacture it here, but there's a lot of other competitive advantages to doing it. And let's also say that the cost of manufacturing something in China has gone up pretty dramatically over the last batch of years. Wages there have gone up quite a lot, and that's a good thing for the people there, but it also gives them less of a competitive advantage and more reason for people to invest in manufacturing in the U.S. All those reasons are the same exact reasons why Google and Motorola built the Moto X in Texas. So the philosophy behind these things matches up. Lenovo is clearly very big on making an impact here in the U.S. and very big on investing in America and the American market. So I'm kind of hopeful that we'll continue to see those phones manufactured here. As an American, I have a clear interest in that continuing to happen.
Sure. They did confirm that the Moto X and the Moto G are still things that they will continue to make.
Yeah.
In general.
Yeah.
Those are pretty well received phones as far as I know.
They'll be made until the obvious end of life. And there are other phones in the roadmap designed with the help of Google that will end up coming out. Lenovo is not just taking it and cutting everything off and starting fresh.
They said it's through 2014 with the roadmap or something like that, I believe.
I believe so. I'd have to double check that.
Yeah. But anyway, the point is that they are not just, like you're saying, cutting it off and moving on, which is good because there's, I think, a lot of existing customers who will be looking forward to hearing more about what's happening with the Moto X and whatever. But I don't know. It seems really awkward. Like if you bought the Moto X in the past year, you are now in a position where the company that made your phone has switched hands, and you see it just feels like uncertain, right? Like I'd feel uncomfy about that if I was a Moto X owner or a Moto G owner or whatever right now.
And I can understand that, but what I'll say is Lenovo has done an amazing job with the ThinkPad line. People were concerned about what would happen when IBM sold that to them, and I don't think that line has suffered at all.
That was kind of a while ago too.
It was a while ago. I couldn't even remember the year actually off the top of my head. But I mean, there was a lot of concern about that, and I was concerned as a certified ThinkPad fanboy that Lenovo was going to take over this beloved line of laptops that I've used my entire life and destroy them. And
God, that's so weird that you've used ThinkPads your whole life, and you're not like 60.
Nope.
They're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. Yours looks like it could really hurt somebody.
It does.
Like it's just like there's just exposed sharp metal.
To be fair,
missing keys.
This is what happens when you have a fairly limited income and you're reliant on recycled computers.
Sure.
So, when my father's job would throw out ThinkPads because they had reached the end of their service with the company, he would bring them home and they would become mine.
This is my experience with like a 486 and a really old, God, I don't even remember what laptop it would have been. I think it might have been a ThinkPad too, actually. But like a ThinkPad where it was early enough that the keyboard was like just the bottom third of the laptop part, or where the keyboard goes, and that the whole top part was just like dead space for no reason. Well, it had like Windows 3.1 on it. It was a nightmare of a computer. It was. I was 10 years old and just breaking it basically. I wasn't doing anything constructive with it. There was no like, you're like talking about rebuilding and making a computer like stronger to be usable. I'm talking about like getting an old broken computer and just continuing to break it basically.
Well, I mean, not really. We continued to break it, at least the laptop.
I played Number Munchers on it. That's about the best I got though. It was
pretty good.
It was pretty good. Pretty good, sir. So anyway though, sorry, not trying to tangent. The ThinkPad thing is crazy. But yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens with this stuff in the next 6 months to a year. It'll be really interesting to see how our relationship with Lenovo changes. I mean, I don't ever work with them. I mean, it's partially because I don't really cover laptops, but I thinking of them as a mobile company is strange to me. Is basically what I'm trying to say.
It's not something we're used to here in the U.S. yet, but we'll have to get there.
I guess so. Lenovo is not even really a company I think of as a consumer-facing company. I know that they make the ThinkPad, and that is obviously a consumer product, but when I think of Lenovo, I think like business solutions or like something like that, right?
Well, I mean,
like,
that's understandable because their big push
Sure.
in the U.S. is the ThinkPad stuff, and that's
Right.
all a business thing. I mean, and they have a consumer-facing extension of that, though. You know, they have the IdeaPad line, and they have all of that.
is the Yoga them?
Yeah, the Yoga is
Yep.
them. So, I mean, they have...
The Yoga is really a name for a computer
yeah, it is.
in the world.
Yep.
It
There's
exists.
several of them.
Just in case
Not even
that was
one.
a question. Man, that is really a thing. All right. Sorry. Anyway, I get befuddled by these names.
No, it's fine.
So yeah, that's really fascinating though, and I love that they dropped it at 5 though. Like we touched on this briefly earlier. Like it was 5 p.m. I was on news, and it was just like casually all of a sudden like, oh, report, maybe Lenovo might be buying Motorola from Google, and you're like, that seems crazy. It's 5 o'clock on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Like why would that be happening right now?
And it was a really quick turnaround from
Mm-hmm.
this sounds like it's going to happen to like less than 20 minutes later. It was confirmed there was PR, and it was like, oh.
It's because Google let everybody at Google know that this was happening, and then immediately there's like thousands of Google employees, so they started leaking it because that's what happens when you send an email to thousands of employees. So like it was official, internal, and then it started leaking. And I try to provide as much insight into the hilarious background of media as often as possible.
It's
I think
good.
ridiculous.
I think, you know, some people out there care.
Yeah, sure.
And I like
There's some folks
sharing
who
it.
I'm sure don't care, but yeah, no, I think that's super interesting seeing how that happens, like the anatomy of news coming out earlier than like huge, crazy billion-dollar international business news dropping because there was just like an email sent to too many people.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Like
And-
human beings are ridiculous.
Yes. You can't trust any of us.
and
And then
in-
we scramble to take care of it.
Sure, yeah.
It's a nightmare.
And in other ridiculous pseudo-business related news, Nintendo did a lengthy investor press conference on, I believe it was Thursday morning Japan time, so late night for us Wednesday.
Yeah.
I remember that because I was working until 9 p.m. Eastern. Woo!
I did that
Talk
the other
about
night anyway.
Nintendo.
But not for Nintendo.
No. Thankfully, our intrepid Japanese editor, Matt Smith, was there covering it as live as possible. And essentially, like, so the head of Nintendo said a bunch of stuff. Basically, this is him giving a presentation to investors because the Wii U is doing so badly.
Yeah. Really, really terribly.
Right. So they
What's-
readjusted their earnings. I
They
know
did.
that before we even get to what their actual earnings were. 'Cause this
Okay.
is, in case it wasn't clear, this is financial earnings season, so that's why there's all this financial news. So Nintendo projected, I think, 7 million sales for the Wii U originally by the end of their fiscal quarter, which would be starting in February. And they actually revised that to half or so, like 3.5 million or something like that. I'm being kind of rough with these numbers, but I mean this to say that they projected way, way, way more Wii U sales than they had, and that means that investors freaked because they're worried that the Wii U is in a really bad place, which it is.
Yeah, well, if you want the actual numbers,
Please.
It was 2.8 million Wii U's sold for the entire year.
Right.
2.8 million.
Which is less than either the Xbox 360 or the PlayStation 4 sold in their first 2 months.
Yep.
Right. That's a huge problem.
Atrocious.
That's not collectively the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. That's individually.
Yeah,
they
either
each sold
one of them.
more than Wii U sold in the entire last year.
Yep.
Which is literally the exact opposite of what you'd expect, right? Like the Xbox 360 intentionally launched a year ahead of PlayStation 3 and Wii to get out ahead of them and to try to establish a base before Sony or Nintendo could do that.
and
it
undercut
worked.
both on price.
Right, it undercut both on price, but it also, by the time that the PS3 and the Wii came out, the Xbox 360 had its second wave of games coming, and that was huge. And that made a huge difference for the Xbox 360 then, and in this case, the Wii U doesn't have that same advantage. It's like in a really bad place, and as a result, there's been a lot of weirdness at Nintendo, and investors are freaking out, and there's been a lot of consumers wondering what's going to happen. So essentially, Iwata announced a bunch of stuff. So where do we begin? I guess I'm going to start with Nintendo connectivity because that's big for me.
Okay.
So essentially, they announced that any future consoles, any future handheld, or any future home console they have to be tethered together to some extent. Not literally tethered together like you connect them to each other, but in the sense that they work together, that they know each other exists, and there is some sort of a connectivity between ownership of titles between the two, that there is some sort of a interaction between the two.
So,
right?
so they want to build a much more coherent platform and ecosystem,
Right.
not just sell you a game console.
Right, which is like, I honestly think kind of way too late. Like, I think they still need to do it, and it's a good thing that they're doing it. But
Yeah.
like, this should have been the case when the 3DS launched, and it's something people were saying then.
Yep.
So there's the Nintendo Network ID that exists now that replaced friend codes, thank God. And the Nintendo Network ID is like Xbox Live, right? Like, you have a gamer tag on Xbox Live. Like Steam, you have a name on Steam. It's the same thing on Nintendo Network ID. You have a name, and that is your name that exists and shows the licenses, the games that you own between 3DS and Wii U, and they just recently got unified. But that's a big part of their push going forward, is to make sure that there's this unified ecosystem, which is like, yeah, man, you should have been doing that. Like, that's kind of what the competition's been doing for like a kind of a long time now.
I mean, Sony's been way out ahead of that, and
Microsoft too, right? Like, Microsoft, amazingly, Xbox Live was years ahead of its time,
Yeah.
and still the gold standard for a lot of people for online gaming, at least console gaming. And Nintendo's Wii U doesn't even come close. And the Wii U is a full generation removed, right? Like,
Yeah.
by that time, they should have learned a lot of things, and they didn't, and that's a big problem. I mean, I think the bigger problem with the Wii U sales is probably that they didn't do a great job of explaining it.
well,
I think people have
can
still...
you explain it?
I mean this, that people are still asking, like, you know, does this Wii U game work on my Wii? I don't have that Wii U peripheral for my Wii. And you're like, oh no, it's a whole different console. Oh no, like, nobody has told you. Like, and this is most people, and there's nothing wrong with not knowing that. I mean, they're named this very similarly.
Yep.
And one of them has a screen that you look at that is also the controller, and it's pretty easy to look at that controller and think, like, maybe this is just a peripheral for my Wii. I mean...
Or maybe that's an entirely different console on its own, separate
Sure.
from the Wii U.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that's been a real issue with them, and in terms of sales. But anyway, back to announcements. He also announced DS games will come out on Wii U.
Which is good.
That's cool. I would like to be able to play 3DS games on Wii U.
Yeah.
But DS games is a good start.
And anything at this point to kind of grow the Wii U's library of games, too. I mean, that's
Right.
one of its pain points. It's kind of a paltry library still.
It is. It's a chicken-filled library. You said paltry, didn't you?
I did.
I'm making a little paltry pun. So anyway, yeah. So the Wii U library is definitely not great, but essentially there was a handful of initiatives though that Iwata announced to try to spur both sales of the Wii U, but to also talk about the future of where Nintendo is going. And this is where things got really weird. So there's like a health thing, like some sort of, I believe the quote was, a wearable that you don't wear. Essentially, though, it's that
I'm gonna look for this while you keep talking.
Please do. So it's essentially, though, that they're before their next console, whether it be a handheld or a home console, they have some sort of a health-related thing, whether that's a service or a device. Of course, I'm sure many people are screaming Vitality Sensor into their computer speakers right now, but I don't know what that actually means. They haven't really been specific. A lot of the stuff that they were speaking about was pretty vague intentionally because it was speaking to investors, so it's speaking to like bigger picture.
Yeah.
We want to do these things, and not saying this is when we are releasing this product and this is what this product is.
Yeah, and that is unfortunately one of the things about this is there's all sorts of potentially interesting stuff in here,
Right.
but it's buried under so many layers of like, you know, financial speak and just kind of absurd, broad, vague details. I was looking at the wearables thing, and I have no idea what the hell they're talking about.
Okay.
So I can't add any additional context to that.
But yeah, beyond that, the one financial thing that's actually of interest to people is that the entire Nintendo executive board, I believe, took a massive pay cut.
Yeah.
As a result of pretty terrible earnings.
Of varying degrees across the board.
Right.
With 50% at the top, and I think like 30 or so after that. The only thing is that these are temporary cuts.
Right.
It's basically a PR move to make it seem like they're being really serious about getting the company back to profitability
Right.
and investing it, but it's not even a full year that they're enduring these pay cuts. It's, 6 months or something like that?
I think it's a quarter.
Even if it's just a quarter? So yeah, you're taking a temporary pay cut of 50%, but you're not even lasting out the year on it. And let's be fair, all of these guys are filthy rich anyway.
July. They'll be
Through July.
Through July.
So yeah, 6 months.
Yeah.
So yeah, a 6-month 50% pay cut is probably more than either me or you make in a year.
Oh,
anyway.
it's not even a question. That's not a probably.
It's probably the entire Engadget budget.
There we go. We're starting to sound more realistic now. Right. Yeah. So it is definitely a PR move. At the same time, man, I wish more executives made PR moves like this because boy, does it make me feel better.
It does.
I mean, I don't care about Nintendo's earnings, so I don't actually feel better about this. But I mean, like when it actually affects me, right? Like, yeah, I don't want to bring up any specific examples, but you know,
I gotcha.
Yeah. So it's something that is definitely. I don't know. I think you can perceive it as just an empty PR move, but I think that there is definitely some intentional shame, and this might be tied to Japanese business and the culture there. I honestly wish Joseph was here to talk about this a little bit more because he knows that stuff.
I think there is probably an element of that, and I'd love to see a little bit more shame in American business culture.
Sure. There's certainly none right now. So.
There's a lot of people who probably should feel a significant amount of shame, and they don't. But let's not get off the rails on that one. We'll probably lose a few listeners if I get off on that rant.
Yeah. But to turn back to the health thing a little bit, I just wanted to point out that I think that's like they specifically characterize it as part of their like blue ocean thing, and that was what they used for the Wii, right? Like, so this is part of the bigger picture of Nintendo's philosophy right now, though, right? Like everything changed with the Wii when they decided to expand beyond the group of hardcore, quote unquote, hardcore gamers and move to a much bigger picture. And with health, I think that they think they can get back into that. And I think with the Wii U, a lot of it is hubris, where they thought they could come in with the Wii U, and the same people who bought the Wii were going to buy the Wii U. And it's like the people who bought the Wii mostly didn't even buy games for the Wii. They're probably not going to buy a new game console that you haven't really explained to them.
As an example, my parents went out and bought a Wii. Not like right when it launched, but I think like that first big price drop, they went out and bought a Wii. Do you know how many games they own for said Wii?
Maybe I'm going to go with a cap of 3, including Wii Sports that comes with it.
2, including Wii Sports that comes with it.
There we go. Was the second Wii Sports Resort?
No.
That's a lot of times for people.
No, it's actually Madden.
Madden, okay. Not what I was expecting.
And I'm pretty sure that my parents didn't buy that. My brother did, and just kind of brought it to the house to play.
Sure.
I think he didn't even live there at that point anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, attachment rates for software with the Wii were horrible because a lot of people bought it to play that Wii Sports game.
Though, to be fair, we play Wii Sports to this day.
That's fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. And Wii Sports is, in my opinion, probably one of the most influential and important video games ever created, so that's totally fine. But that said, it's one game that comes with the console, and that's a big problem, right? Like, third parties on Wii were in the same position there with Wii U. So, like, we've seen a lot of articles recently talking about, you know, how is Nintendo going to win back third-party support? Is Nintendo going to go mobile? Or straight-up analysts saying Nintendo needs to go mobile, which I don't necessarily know is true. That's actually funny because there was a lot of ballyhoo over whether or not Iwata would come out during this thing on Thursday and say, like, we're going to push to mobile, we're going to do, like, demos there that you can check out, and then they'll direct you to go buy it on 3DS or Wii U. And that apparently, at least so far, is not announced as a thing that's happening. Nintendo actually denied it to us that they were doing that, although they've fully lied before, so who knows?
Yeah.
Their mobile strategy continues to be one that doesn't exist, basically. They just don't approach mobile. They sort of do these ancillary side things. They promised that Miiverse would have an iOS and Android app at some point that
but still have not surfaced.
Does not exist still. So there are ways that they could work with mobile that are interesting, that are not let's port Mario to your phone.
And I mean, and they definitely need to make a move on mobile, and they need to figure out a way to capitalize on those properties. But I'm with you that I don't necessarily agree that simply porting Mario 64 to iOS is going to solve their problems.
I straight up don't want to play that. Like, I don't want to play Grand Theft Auto on my phone. It's junk.
Oh, yeah, no. I'm one of the idiots who bought Grand Theft Auto on Android, and it's terrible.
It's a horrible situation. I mean, it's impressive that it exists there, but it's incredibly unfun to play.
Yeah, I just go back to playing it on my PC.
Right. And you should, because instead of having 20 contextual touch-based buttons
that
on your
are
phone,
completely unresponsive.
Right. That you kind of don't want to play that, right? Like the one time I go to press a button and it doesn't happen, I just never want to play that game again, right?
Yeah.
And so I totally understand Nintendo's reticence to not just port their games. Because, like, yes, if you just drop Mario on an iPhone, a lot of idiots, admittedly, are going to buy that because they don't know better. I don't mean idiots like those dummies, what a bunch of jerks. I mean, like, they're ignorant to the concept of why this is going to be a bad experience. And, or maybe it's just good enough for them, right? Maybe they're fine with it. I think that is dumb and wrong, but that's just me.
You think a lot of things are dumb and wrong.
I do, in fairness. So, yeah, that's something that I continue to disagree with analysts and stuff about, like, just drop their games to mobile, and it's kind of good that they're not doing that. I was worried that was going to be part of the announcement, that there would be some sort of a guttural reaction where, like, okay, the investors say we should be doing this. Let's try to appease them because we are so far behind in what we said we were going to do. But thankfully that has not happened. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. They've done some really minor stuff, like Pokédex is on. That's the index of Pokemon, in case you were wondering. It's a portmanteau, just like Pokemon, which is a portmanteau for pocket monsters. It's a portmanteau within a portmanteau.
You are dropping so much knowledge right now.
So there's some extensions of brands, but there's not like, I don't think we're still. I legitimately don't think we'll see, at least for another many moons, just straight up Nintendo games on mobile like that. And I hope we don't, because I mean, Sonic did that. It's junk.
It is.
It's bad.
I mean, I love the Sonic franchise. I love those games.
I disagree with that too, but that's a whole other conversation.
I don't know. I've had fond memories of the Sonic titles.
That's fair.
There's nothing like that music, the start of Green Zone 1. Like,
the music is good. I'm down with the music.
But yeah, those games are pretty terrible on mobile.
Yeah, they are. So yeah, I don't know. It was interesting to see a dump of news from Nintendo this week, and it's. I think we'll see the best Nintendo we'll have seen in a bunch of years, because they're down and out.
Yeah,
like Nintendo does its best when they are in the position where they have to fight their way out of a corner, and I am seriously looking forward to that.
I'm hoping for that, honestly.
Well, they've proven that they've been able to do that several times before. So keep the faith.
Yeah.
And they have an unbelievable amount of money in which to invest in this stuff, so that helps too.
They just need to throw money at a problem.
I wouldn't say that. That's, I think, proven a mistake in many different industries. But
yeah.
They need to do something. They have plenty of money to find what that thing is, though, which is good. So yeah. But otherwise, it's been there was some other stuff. There was Paper.
Yeah,
right? Paper came out this week.
Real quick though, because we're coming up on the end of the show. If anybody has any questions,
Sure.
You know the deal. Drop them in chat. I saw a couple in there. We'll come back to them.
You know what I want to do, actually, instead of talking about Paper?
What do you want to
know
talk
what Paper
about?
is. It's an app.
Yeah,
it's a thing. It's a
Facebook thing. It doesn't matter.
I want to talk about this podcast a little bit with you.
Okay,
and I want to do that with people listening, because we're changing things up.
We are.
You guys probably noticed from this episode we only did 2 subjects. We're going to be introducing some more segments.
We are.
We're going to be,
hopefully,
kind of formalizing things a little bit. But the podcast is going to change a little bit, and I know I don't think I'm alone in this. I think we'd love your feedback.
Oh, we wouldn't just love it. We need it.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, you're the people who listen to it. We do this for you guys, not for us. I mean, we kind of do it for us because we love to hear ourselves talk. But we don't need microphones in front of us to do that.
Right. So I would love, personally, this is the first week we've done it without video. I'd love to know if you guys are super into video, or if you're cool with this, or if, you'd rather we did it with video with crazy, wacky visual elements. I'd love to hear your ideas for segments.
Yep.
Maybe how hard can an Engadget editor punch Terrence in the face?
Turns out kind of hard.
Pretty hard. We've already got that segment covered, sadly.
Well, I mean, we can keep
redoing
it. We can just see. We can do every week. Let a different editor punch me in the face until we find out who hits the hardest.
Sure.
I just dropped a link in chat, by the way, for those who are listening to the forums where we're collecting your ideas and your feedback. If you want to leave it there, that would be super helpful, rather than just leaving it in the chat, which we're probably not going to look at after today. Those ideas will probably fall by the wayside.
You can email any of us.
Yeah.
It's just our first name at Engadget.com.
Yep.
Or you could get in touch with our tips line.
Yep.
Or you can leave a comment on the podcast post. Any of these good things.
Send us messages on Twitter.
But I think it's fair to say that you're gonna see Terrence, myself, and Joseph here regularly, weekly. Yep. We'll have some guests. We're going to be doing some guests from outside of the Engadget towers. We're going to be some inside Engadget folks, some outside folks. All sorts of stuff.
We might just pick somebody randomly off the street one day.
Just talk to him about whatever.
Yeah.
Just get wild.
I actually kind of thought about doing that today, just like grabbing a random person. Like, here, come be on this thing that you have no idea about.
That would be a very weird hour.
I know.
But, I mean, you could just call it Terrence's Weird Hour. That sounds like a great segment right there.
I agree.
Just Terrence getting weird with a person for an hour. So yeah, I think that we'll still be covering the general big news topics. I think that you can count on us for that, and we'll still gonna go into them a little deeper. We'll still be talking about all sorts of nonsense outside of that stuff that tangents off. But some more segments, some more structure.
Yeah.
Little difference, little change.
Unless everybody out there doesn't want that.
Unless everybody revolts and sets the building on fire and says, we have to go back to the way that it originally was.
And then we'll just turn it into a free-for-all.
Right. But
actually,
we can't
maybe
bring
that's
back...
a thing we should do, is not even have hosts anymore. We'll just set up mics in the middle of the compound and let people just come up and talk. Just stream 24/7.
I like the idea that we're in a compound.
Yeah.
That Engadget offices are somewhere in the middle of a crazy compound. When I think compound, I think like prison.
Well,
or like military. Maybe that's just
what company have you worked for the last several
years?
No,
I mean, anyway. So so we'll be fascinated to hear that stuff and let us know.
Yeah,
send us crazy pictures of things.
Yeah,
something safe for work. Hopefully.
Do you want to answer a couple of questions before we call this?
Sure. What's up? What we got?
So we got one question here, wondering whether or not we think Samsung is actually going to completely kill off the magazine UI, which, for the people who don't know, is the new interface that Samsung debuted at CES, which is dramatically different from the already pretty terrible TouchWiz, and in fact is basically completely unidentifiable as Android.
Didn't it look kind of Windows 80?
Yeah, it does. It's got all these big tiles and
That's
squares, and at least according to some sources, it was that prompted Google to go to Samsung and be like, hey, guys, can you take it down a notch?
So, well, the reports that Google and Samsung had were from CES. Like the conversation.
Yeah, the conversation took place
at CES. Right. So as a result of that, and the fact that Samsung announced it at the same place, I doubt that, right? Like, because Samsung no doubt told Google about magazines way ahead of CES. Maybe they said like, oh, well, let's talk at CES when you announce it, but I doubt it. You'd think they'd try to get out ahead of it.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's a reaction now.
Well,
I think that's just our perspective because we don't see the inside dealings.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing is, I don't necessarily think it was a reaction either, but I also do sincerely doubt that Samsung is going to Google every time they decide to do something. Oh, hey, by the way, we're completely changing the way Android looks. You guys cool with that?
That seems like a big enough deal that they would talk to Google about it beforehand.
I mean, I kind of feel like if that was how they did things all the time, Google will be raising a lot more flags when they go, hey, so by the way, you know that Google Now voice search thing you have? We're going to completely replace it with this other stupid thing we have, and we're going to put S on it. By the way, you know that messaging app you have? It's really nice and everything, but we're just going to duplicate all of the functions except crappier and slap our name on it. Hey, you know that media store you have? We're going to hide that somewhere and direct everybody to our own media store.
They're going to hide it? Oh, is that like pied in the past?
Yes.
Oh.
So, yeah, I don't know if they're going to kill it off completely. I wouldn't be shocked if they did. The reaction from people that I've heard so far, at least within our circles, it's not out in the general public yet, is that the magazine UI is a little messy looking and kind of a little bit confusing.
Get right out.
Yeah.
Skin looks bad and is messy and stupid.
Well, I mean, because it's so different from every other experience you've ever had with Android, it's basically completely counterintuitive. It's using a completely new operating system.
Right.
So I think there's a pretty good chance you'll see that fall by the wayside. The important thing to remember, unfortunately, is that nowhere in any of the reports of this deal, though, does it say that Samsung is going to start installing like stock vanilla Android on anything.
Nope.
You're probably still going to have to deal with TouchWiz at the very least. So that's kind of unfortunate.
I can't imagine why I wouldn't want to use Android. It's so weird. I know. I'm the weird one.
We've got one other question, and this is going back to the Lenovo thing. Wondering if you were Lenovo.
Who is this? Who's that? Who are these people asking these questions?
This is.
Give them a shout out.
An unpronounceable collection of letters and numbers.
Oh, fantastic.
Asopath? Sure.
Okay.
Here's a guy in chat.
Yeah, I got that.
He also disagrees with you, by the way, and says that Sonic is dope. And he's right.
There are a lot of Sonic apologists out there.
He's just wondering, if you're Lenovo, wouldn't you want to reduce the operating costs of Motorola by moving the manufacturing to China? And I won't get into too much detail on it because we kind of touched on it before, but the thing is that it's not really that cut and dry anymore that moving manufacturing to China is going to reduce your operating costs.
Right.
There's shipping costs, there's speed of delivery, there's, and wages are going up there by as much as, between 15 and 20% per year for several years now.
I think something like the Moto X actually is it's like an especially interesting example of not being worth shipping back to China because of the customization options.
Exactly.
And something like that it makes more sense for it to be done here, even if it costs more, like you're saying. Like, it probably makes more sense for them to do it here to avoid the hassle and the logistical nightmare that it would be to get that done there.
Yeah.
If it's even possible, right?
I mean, I'm sure it's possible, but it's the difference between, what's the turnaround, I think, is like 2 to 4 days on a customized Moto X right now.
Right.
If it's being manufactured in Texas, and if it was being manufactured in China, you're probably looking at more like 2 to 4 weeks.
Right.
And, nobody wants to deal with that sort of delay. Nobody wants to buy a cell phone and then wait 4 weeks for it to be delivered to their house.
Right. I do really want a wood phone, though. Legitimately.
I'm going to go back to my desk after this is over, actually, and continue to stare at the customized version sitting in my shopping cart and decide whether or not I want to pull the trigger on it.
Don't do it. Oh, well, you have an old phone. You probably need to replace it at this point.
I really do need to replace it, but I don't know how much I want to drop $400 on a mid-range phone.
Whoa, you could buy a PlayStation 4. What are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
PlayStation phone won't make phone calls, though, or send text messages.
No, not a PlayStation phone. Oh, a PlayStation. I'm sorry.
4.
I'm getting things confused.
You are.
It will not send text messages, but it's way better than a phone. Phones are stupid. Come on.
I mean, phones are kind of necessary.
They're
PlayStation
necessary,
4
yes.
it is not.
Wait, let me ask you. Your phone there. What is this? Is this an old Nexus?
Yeah, this is the Galaxy Nexus,
Galaxy
the
Nexus,
Verizon
right.
version, of course, the crappy one.
Because you're locked into your forever contract on Verizon.
Yeah, I'm probably going to be leaving this soon.
Oh, man. That's such a shame.
Yeah, John's over there gloating about his unlocked HSPA version, which
Monsters.
he loves.
So that phone you've got there, that still makes phone calls, right? And it still sends text messages?
Barely.
Barely? It falls apart while you're making a phone call?
It will reboot when I try to answer calls or when I hang up on calls. It has a tendency to lose its network connection, and it won't come back until I reboot the phone. So, yeah.
Great.
There's a lot of problems.
Great. Okay, so maybe buy a phone instead of the PS4.
It's getting about time.
Jesus.
So, by the way, he says just call him Paf. Thank you, Paf, for those questions.
There you go.
It was really good. We're out of time for this week, I think.
We are.
Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week. Ben will be here.
I will be.
Yes.
No, that's a lie. I'll be at DICE. I'm at DICE
that's
next
right.
week.
You're at
I
DICE?
wish we had talked about that a little. That's a shame.
Oh.
I'll be at DICE next week interviewing all these amazing people. I'm interviewing KJ Inafune, the creator of Mega Man. I'm interviewing, excuse me, Steve Gaynor, the guy who created Gone Home. Interviewing Neil Druckmann, the creative lead on Last of Us. Should be a lot of good video game news next week that is a little bit outside of what we usually hit, but DICE will be a good time.
Yeah.
I unfortunately have to go to Vegas again. But
yeah, that sucks for you.
But I'm excited to go see Alexander from Joystick and see various game industry people, so that'll be fun.
So that sounds exciting. So you won't be here next week.
I could Skype in. We'll talk about it.
We'll talk it. We'll figure it out. Joseph should be back.
Joseph will be back.
I should still be here. Provided that nothing tragic happens when I leave the office today. So yeah, we'll be back next week. Thanks for listening, everybody. This has been the Engadget Podcast, which is every week brought to you by Verizon's Powerful Answers, because the world's biggest challenges deserve even bigger solutions.
It's true.